Certainly, yesterday was a tough day for the whole Flyers organization. These decisions are not easy, but I want to tell you that Paul and I have been in constant communication, the last several weeks and really pondering the team performance. And the bottom line is we just thought we needed to make more progress. So we made the change.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Puck short.
That the voice of Comcast Spectacle Chairman and CEO Dave Scott speaking at the press conference earlier this week, during which he and Philadelphia Flyers President Paul Holmgren explained their decision to sack Ron Hextall as the team's general manager. And that is where we will start episode 90 of the One Puck Short podcast. Hello everybody, thanks for joining me once again. As always, I'm your host, Rob McGregor. Flying solo this week, after having guests with me the last 2 weeks. It's just me on my lonesome, but as always, plenty to talk about. I'm going to focus on the big stories of the week. As I noted, the Flyers sacking their GM is about as big as they come, I would say. You don't see too many general managers dismissed in season. It was Ron Hextall's 5th season in the job. He was promoted from assistant general manager to general manager in May 2014 after Holmgren himself became the team's president. The Flyers made the playoffs in 2 of the previous 4 seasons under Hextall, but they're 10-11-2 at the time of the firing, 15th in the East, 5 points outside of the playoffs. And it's tough to see where they're going to make up that ground right now. They're bottom of the East, as I mentioned. They have 22 points. They're below Florida. They've got a terrible start. New Jersey, divisional rivals there. They're behind Pittsburgh, the Islanders. Carolina in that second wildcard spot on 27 points. As I say, they're 5 points out there and in a real tough situation. And one thing that's really concerning is their goals against. Their goals against per game, 3.57, third worst in the NHL after Florida and Ottawa. One thing really stood out from the press release that the Flyers issued when they announced the decision to dismiss Hextall. It said, "It has become clear that we no longer share the same philosophical approach concerning the direction of the team. In light of these differences, we feel it's in the organisation's best interest to make a change effective immediately." Those are the words of President Paul Holmgren, who of course has been associated with the Flyers for 40 years now, as Dave Scott pointed out during the press conference I referenced earlier. Holmgren didn't really seem to want to elaborate too much on the specifics of that philosophical difference when asked at the press conference, however.
Obviously, there's a lot of ways you can go with that, but ultimately, I'll echo what Dave said about Hexie. Hexie in his time as general manager has put this organization in a good spot. With the young players that are in place right now on our farm system, our prospect cupboard is full. There's cap space, which is always a good thing. Having said that, I just felt in the best interest of the organization, it was time to look for a new voice that can, with a different mindset, that can push the team to the next level.
As was queried, why Hextall? Why not Dave Hextall, head coach of the Philadelphia Flyers? Well, that seems to be the point that people are struggling with. Holmgren denied that there was friction between him and Hextall regarding Hextall's future. There have been some suggestions that maybe because Hextall was reticent or not keen or whatever you want to call it, or didn't want to fire Hextall, Holmgren maybe intervened and said, well, if you won't get rid of him, we'll get rid of you. That is something that has been suggested, as I said, by a couple of people at least, and it kind of hangs around there, but Holmgren denied it at the press conference. He was asked directly if that conversation came up. He said no, but Hextall himself has admitted that his future is in question depending on who the new general manager is. We've also seen Gord Murphy dismissed as one of the assistant coaches, and perhaps surprisingly, Chris Pryor has lost his job as the director of player personnel with the Flyers. Given their pretty solid drafting record in the last few years, Pryor maybe, deserved to stick around, but there seems to be an element of sweeping out some of Hextall's hires or moves or fingerprints or however you want to term it, because Calvin Pickard has also moved on. He's been claimed by the Arizona Coyotes on waivers. So I mean, I like Pickard's game, just to deviate slightly. I thought he did well on a poor Avs team previously. He kind of got stuck in the depth chart in Toronto last year. Playing with the Flyers on waivers earlier this season. Hasn't had the best of luck. As noted, the Flyers goaltending has again been up for question. It's very difficult. Brian Elliott's been solid 5-on-5, but overall that has been an area again for the Flyers. I know the narrative keeps coming back to Philadelphia Flyers goaltending over the years. They just can't seem to find a solution. Sometimes you don't always need a superstar, you just need some consistency, and they haven't been able to get that for one reason or another. As I said, the penalty kill was the worst in the NHLs. That is never going to help your goaltenders, but it's something that people are going to keep coming back to, and it's understandable. I mean, Elliott's hurt, Michael Neuwirth is hurt again. At this point, you start to feel bad for the guy. But that's an area they are apparently exploring. I don't know exactly where they would go on that front. Maybe they look to pick up a prospect, someone in a system, someone like Ville Husso in St. Louis, or someone struggling elsewhere. But how exactly they do that, who they go in for, I don't know. They've got kind of Hart in the system. He's not ready yet, I don't think. There's a certain pressure there on the Flyers maybe to call Hart up because he has this pretty high ceiling, but there's also the risk in doing that. Actually, you derail his development slightly or put him back a step rather than pulling him forward. So, he's talking the talk. He says he's keen to come up, but sometimes patience is a virtue with young goaltenders. That maybe was a sticking point again with Hextall. He didn't want to bring Hart up. He wanted to exercise patience. And that seems to be another area of possible friction. Holmgren himself admitted that, he was more aggressive as a general manager, whereas Hextall was more cautious. We come back to that philosophical difference again. Does it mean a coaching change? Well, as we said, Dave Hextall himself admits the new general manager will have a large say in that. So Joel Grimval is out there, Alain Vigneault is out there, Tom McClellan is out there. It's always going to be the sword of Damocles for Hextall. Or I say always going to be. It's going to be the sword of Damocles for him, certainly until the general manager situation is addressed. So who might it be? Well, Minnesota Wild, or former Minnesota Wild general manager Chuck Fletcher is apparently the front runner. Fletcher parted company with the Wild during the summer when his contract came to an end. He's been around the block, he knows the league. I think he helped advance the Wild, even though I think he'd taken them as far as he could at the time he parted company. I think that was the right decision for the Wild at the time. But given where the Flyers are right now, given what Fletcher did, as I said, for the Wild, I think he did help advance Minnesota as a franchise. And again, he knows the league, he's got contacts, people know him, people like him. And that may sound odd, but if you're going to hire a guy to be a general manager, if other general managers think he's an arsehole, it's going to be really difficult to build some trades for the team who've got cap space, they've got prospects, but they just need to try and solve some of these problems. Others in the frame, Mark Hunter, who was passed over for the job at the Maple Leafs in favour of Kyle Dubas. I'm not saying whether that was right or wrong. Dubas is doing pretty well, I think, in Toronto right now. Of course, that meant Hunter parted company with the Leafs, so would he be interested in a move to the Flyers? Perhaps. Ron Francis is another name I've seen flagged up. Of course, he was Carolina general manager for a time. He didn't do so well there, but he, again, respected around the league, well liked, great track record as a player. Buffalo Sabres assistant general manager Steve Greeley also in the frame, allegedly. Certainly interesting times in Philadelphia. One thing you can always come back to, especially just on the wrong side of American Thanksgiving, shall we call it, is that crazy statistic of the teams in a playoff spot at American Thanksgiving. 80% of them make the cut at the end of the year, and that's been that way for several years. That's a pretty wild statistic there. It does mean that there'll be a change of 3 or 4 teams out of the 16, but it's hard to see where the Flyers make up that ground. They were well short at the time of American Thanksgiving. I said that in a really awkward way, didn't I? There were 6 points outside the playoffs. 5 points outside the playoffs at the time, 6 points outside the wild card spots because the Atlantic is so crazy this year and basically has 5 teams hanging around there. But, how to make up that ground in the NHL now, it doesn't sound a lot, but in reality, it's quite a lot of points. They need to leapfrog 4 other teams in their division just to get on the heels of Carolina. They need to get past the Devils, the Pens, the Islanders, as I say, to get over and past the Carolina Hurricanes. So, big ask, big challenge for the new general manager, big challenge for Dave Hextall, I think, to keep his job now that fans aren't happy with the style of hockey they're seeing by all accounts. Obviously, upper management wasn't very happy. You look at how long Holmgren's been associated with the team, the kind of teams he would have seen on the ice. You think back to the Broad Street Bullies, you think back to even Legion of Doom and all this. And you can understand maybe from his point of view what he sees now is not what he would call Flyers hockey. And I think that's true of a lot of people. So I think that has played into this a little bit as well. The system isn't one necessarily familiar. Maybe it's the kind that will work long term in the NHL, perhaps. Again, that is a point of debate that is really hard to get past. And at this point, I'm almost trying to be the optimist for Dave Hextall, but it's very difficult to see how he remains in his position once the new general manager is in place.
We have a trade to announce. And for those of you in the building, you'll be particularly interested.
A trade. A good trade. Well, an interesting trade to talk about, shall we say. A good trade is a relative term. Of course, a lot of moves we see are pretty minor in the season. Once you get towards the trade deadline, things tend to hot up a little bit. Pearson for Hagelin was interesting into a point because it was two struggling teams in the Pens and the Kings. In this case, it's again two teams outside the playoffs. So to be fair, again, you could characterise this as two struggling teams, but it's involving three young players. Arizona Coyotes get Nick Schmaltz, Chicago Blackhawks get Dylan Strome and Brendan Perlini. Now, the really interesting part here is that all three of these players were first-round picks. Strome, third overall pick in 2015, following Connor McDavid and Jack Eichel. He was picked ahead of Mitch Marner, Rantanen, Matt Barzal, and many, many others that I'm sure John Scheiker doesn't need to be reminded about every 10 minutes because that wasn't his pick. But he has obviously had to deal with the hand he's been dealt and try and remain patient with Strome and Perlini. And that was something he referenced when talking about the trade. He said, for us, there's a key difference between patience and hope. I don't think hope is a good long-term strategy. I thought we showed the requisite patience for these guys in terms of their development. Go through the checklist as an organisation to make sure you provide the players with all the tools and support, helping them through their development path. But at the same time, they have to show progress along that development path, eventually become the players you would have hoped they were when you drafted them. Well, I think it's fair to say neither has quite panned out how the Coyotes envisaged when they drafted them. Strome had 3 goals and 6 points in 20 games for the Coyotes before the trade. He has 7 goals and 16 points in 48 career NHL games for the Coyotes. And he never quite got past the queries about his skating. But equally, he's a big-bodied centre. You can understand why the Coyotes would have wanted to select him when they did, to get that guy down the middle to really bolster a franchise, trying to pull itself out of the basement and kind of slowly doing that. But the skill set that people saw, that big frame, never all came together into what Arizona needed him to be. But the Hawks think they can change that. He had 1+1 in his debut Tuesday night, albeit that was in an 8-3 loss. So not the most standout team performance during the debut of Dylan Strome and Brendan Perlini, but Dylan Strome himself did at least get his Blackhawks account open. Can he go on to become a useful second-line centre for Chicago? Maybe. Obviously, if the Blackhawks can unlock that potential, they'll be very happy. They've probably got a guy who they can keep on a cost-controlled contract for the time being. Something that is very important to them as an organisation because they're so close to the cap all the time. They've got so much money tied up in a handful of older core guys. With the way Strome has struggled to develop thus far, when it comes to renegotiating in 2020, they can say, well, you know what, Dylan, you've done well or badly or this or that in the last season and a half here. We're willing to give you an opportunity to kick on or do this or do that or do whatever. But the point being, Chicago here has a little bit more control with a young man who's trying to find his way, could still be a really useful asset to them. On the other hand, we have Brendan Perlini, who was drafted 12th overall in 2014. 2 goals and 6 points in 22 games for the Coyotes this season. Not where the team wanted him to be. He's got 17 goals last year. The Coyotes had hoped he might develop into a 25-goal scorer. It quite worked out. He had 1 assist in the last 5 games. The Coyotes, he's gone 10 games without a goal. He made his Blackhawks debut against the Golden Knights on Tuesday as well. There's obviously the British element here, or the British interest here, being a Guildford-born player, albeit his goal, as Mark Lazarus kind of confirmed on Twitter earlier, in conversation with me and Paul Newman from the Daily Mail, who expressed an interest in whether Brendan would want to play for Team GB at the World Championships this year. Mark said no, Brendan's goal is to play for Team Canada one day, and that's always been the impression I've got following things along anyway with Perlini. But I digress slightly there. This is a young man who, as we said, the Coyotes were hoping would be a 20 to 30 goal scorer, 25, whatever you want to call it. And it just hasn't really happened for him. And, he scored that great goal on the power play against Carolina, but it was one of only 2 goals this year. And there were concerns. There were concerns about how he was developing, his effort levels, and all these sort of things which, are troubling for young players. But again, a fresh start in a new city, an organisation like the Blackhawks, which has a great reputation, despite their on-ice struggles right now. This could be what he needs. There would be an opportunity there, perhaps, to become a top 6 winger, to play alongside like Patrick Kane, Brandon Saad, if he's still there. Obviously, he's constantly listening to trade talks. And, the Blackhawks could do with someone like that to come in, take a little bit of the pressure off some of their other guys who are under the microscope. And Alex DeBrincat, Brendan Perlini, and Dylan Strome. Strome, DeBrincat were teammates in Erie in junior. So those 3 guys could be a big part of the Blackhawks' future. But equally, maybe they won't. The interesting thing with Perlini, of course, is he kind of follows another winger, the path of another winger in Anthony Duclair, who started bright in Arizona, didn't quite work out, traded to the Blackhawks. Now he's with the Columbus Blue Jackets and doing kind of well, so I wouldn't write Perlini off, per se. Some people maybe have said that, if this is where he's at 22, it's not a great place to be, but as we said, the same applies to Perlini as we noted with Strome. Maybe the Blackhawks say, look, you've done X for us in half a season, we think there's something there, we're willing to offer you this deal, and the Blackhawks get a guy with top 6 potential on a cost-controlled contract, which again helps with that whole cap situation they have.
Step back again, kept in again, came in front of the net. Here it is in front of the net. Skinner back. Jeff Skinner wins it for Buffalo in overtime. And you asked for it, you got it. These guys are good. Scary good.
All right, so a feel-good story. We've done firing, we've done a trade. Let's talk about the Buffalo Sabres, though. The league leaders, will you believe, in the NHL right now. They've won 10 straight. First overall, as I mentioned. This is such a far cry from where they were at last season. They finished dead last, 31st overall. Perhaps by the time you're listening to this, they have slipped back slightly. They play Tampa Bay Thursday night, tonight, I'm recording, and they're in Florida tomorrow on Friday. But just that huge turnaround. 31st overall, but dead last. There were multiple wins away, like 2-3 wins back of the team in 30th. But now they're flying. The big thing is, or the big 2 things, should I say, to be fair, scoring. They're scoring goals. Jeff Skinner, acquired from the Carolina Hurricanes, he has 19 goals in 25 games. He's rediscovered his magic touch, and that's been a big part, I think, of the Sabres. Right, Jason Pominville has 9 goals and 18 points in 25 games. His pseudo-resurrection this year has also helped considerably, I think. He's a veteran guy, but he had a couple of leaner years going into unrestricted free agency in the summer. I'm sure he's pretty happy to be back on the horse. Skinner's also a UFA, I should add. So there may be some interesting conversations for the Sabres coming up over the next few months. But if you're a winning team, doesn't that make it that much easier to sign or re-sign Skinner? Re-sign Pominville, maybe to a short deal. He's 35 now, so there's always that risk with the 35-plus contract. But you also have Casey Millerstad, who Matt Larkin highlighted on last week's episode. Carl Poso is signed till 2023. Jack Eichel, of course, is maybe underrated almost because he was picked behind McDavid, because Buffalo haven't been that attractive as a team outside of their own fan base for a while. And to be fair, their fan base, when they're on TV, when they're on, involved in games like Winter Classics and Heritage Classics and so forth, they move the TV needle. But for a lot of other people, it's like, it's the Sabres. What are they doing with themselves these days? Oh, look, they're in the basement. They're not the basement anymore. And they've got real potential. Connor Sheary came in. He's only 26. Actually, Eichel, 22. Skinner's only 26 still. He's been around for a long time because he debuted at, 18? So he has been in the league for 8 years, but he's still got another, 10 years in him? Sam Reinhart's 23. Middlestad's 20. On the back end, Ristolainen, 24. Zach Bogosian, who's maybe actually finally something resembling healthy. He's still only 28, and I know he was highlighted by one of the Sabres players. Who was he in conversation with? Was it Scott Burnside or Elliot Friedman? I forget. Somebody else referenced it on one of the podcasts. But the point was made that Bogosian had been a big part of the team's success. Jake McCabe's having a good season as well. And of course they added Rasmus Dahlin as the first overall pick this summer just gone. So, on the ice, outskaters is the word I'm looking for very clumsily. They're suddenly looking like a night and day compared to what they were last year, when they were averaging barely over 2 goals a game. Now they're averaging 3, which is a huge difference over the course of the season. I know it doesn't sound much for us, 1 goal. Over the course of the year, that's huge. That's multiple wins, and we're seeing that now. And where they are in the standings reflects that. And as I said before, given where they were at American Thanksgiving, they statistically should make the playoffs now. They were top 3 in the Atlantic Division at Thanksgiving. And literally just off the top as well. They had 30 points at Thanksgiving. Tampa Bay led the Atlantic with 31 at the time. So, they've been right up there through the first quarter of the season. And, they're not hammering teams often. They've had a couple of big wins, but they're winning 1-goal battles. They're grinding things out to get wins in overtime or points in overtime, shootouts. And they're also getting good goaltending. And that's the second big thing. I talked about the scoring and the development of the outskaters, and I specifically said outskaters for this reason. They're getting good goaltending this year, or consistent goaltending. I think that's a better way to look at it. Carter Hutton, 18 starts, 12 wins. Wins are a team stat. I point that out. But the big ones here for him on a personal level, save percentage, .920. That's all situations, but that's what I'll go with because it kind of nicely encapsulates the point. They're getting decent goaltending, consistent goaltending. Same with Linus Ullmark. Now, Ullmark, I'm a little frustrated on his behalf because a lot of people have been saying, where's this guy come from? We didn't have him pegged as an NHL goaltender. But Ullmark showed the ability to be an NHL goaltender. Even when the Sabres stank, there was clearly something there. That, and he has cool minion masks. Go and check out his masks on Google Images because he's got some of the coolest designs in the NHL. But he's starting to make the point that, hey, you know what? I'm not just a guy being victimized on a bad team. He's 25 as well. He's got, again, years left in him. His career save percentage is .919. You consider how bad some of the teams he's been on. Finally, he seems to be getting some of the credit he deserves. Hopefully, he'll get a few more games as well. I think at one point he was probably pegged as their future starter. I think that's probably Carter Hutton's job to lose, to win, to hold on to, whatever you want to call it. But that was the point of Hutton joining the Sabres. He'd done well at the Predators, backing up Pekka Rinne and filling in when Rinne was hurt or out of form. He did the same in St. Louis behind Jake Allen. He deliberately joined the Sabres this summer because it was an opportunity to claim a starting role. And he's gone ahead and done that. And you know what? His highs probably aren't as high as a Robin Lehner, but his lows aren't as low either. I use that tentatively. I know the issues Robin Lehner, I'm not making light of the mental health issues, don't at me. The point I'm making is Robin Lehner's ceiling was pretty high, it still is, but consistency was always the problem. And I think, to deviate again slightly, Lehner moving to the Islanders, having that very personal and public column go out explaining what had gone on over the last few years with his mental health and his battle with drink and all this stuff, I think that was a really positive step for him because it's starting a new chapter. And in a new organisation, which is much better defensively than it was since they rolled Barry Trotz. So, I think that was good for Lehner to make that change, and it's been good for the Sabres because it was a very up and down situation in net for that team last year. And they needed that consistency that they're now getting. As I said, Hutton's highs won't be as high, but his lows probably won't be as low. He's much more down the line. I like that about him. And as we kind of talked about last week with Matt Larkin, there's something to be said for that. If you know what you're going to get from your goaltender 95% of the time, 99% of the time, even 90% of the time perhaps, as a coach, as a defence, as an organisation, it's much easier to move forward, to say these are our goals, this is what we expect, this is what we have to do to be successful, and this is what we know we're going to get from our goalie, our star centre, our best defence. When you have that kind of reliability and understanding of what is available to you as an organisation, as a team, it makes everything else so much easier. Because it's like, right, what do we need to do to be successful? What have we got in this team already? What have we got in this locker room? What do we need to add? What do we need to change? What do we need to tweak? All these things get so much easier when you know where you're at as a team, as an organisation. And kind of brings that to the team. He brings that calm. He brings that consistency, which they've longed for, I think, in Buffalo for some time now. Between the pipes, that erratic up and down just wasn't helping them, especially when their offense was struggling as well. So, can it continue? Do you know what? If anybody who follows Sean Tierney, if you don't, I think you should, at Charting Hockey on Twitter. He does some great graphs, advanced stat graphs, and he puts them out there. The most average team in the NHL is the Buffalo Sabres, but it works. They don't give up more shots than they take, or vice versa. They're pretty even on that front. They'll take 20 shots on goal, but only concede 20 or 30 or whatever. And equally, their shooting percentage isn't ridiculously high. They're not riding some PDO wave like the Islanders were. They're even keeled, and that tends to be at least a recipe to hang where you are in the standings. Which makes me think that, you know what, they'll hang about. They'll make the playoffs. They've got points in the bag. There's no reason to think they're going to come crashing down at any point, bar a complete meltdown from Hutton and Ullmark at the same time. I just don't see either of them having that kind of meltdown at the same time. One of them might go cold for a little while, but the other has already proven he can pick up the slack. If Hutton has a bad stretch, Ullmark steps in. If Ullmark's a little bit ropey, maybe they lean on Hutton a little bit more for a couple of weeks. They have that option now, and that's great to see. Patrick Berglund's missed some time. They should get him back as well at some point. That will help. All these things matter. And it's, it's kind of nice to see Buffalo on the up again. They had some really rum years there, some really difficult years, and they tanked pretty hard to try and get McDavid. Jack Eichel is certainly not a bad consolation prize. It's like saying, you didn't get the Bugatti Veyron, but here's a Lamborghini. It's not like you've done badly out of the situation. As I said, this guy's got 28 points in 25 games. He is the heartbeat of that team. He's an outstanding talent, and he's helping bring Buffalo back to, relevance. At the other end of the table, we have the LA Kings. Oh dear. Even a couple of weeks ago when I spoke to Kat Silverman, we probably have agreement that their season was over. As good as, because they're so far out. They're now 9 points behind the Winnipeg Jets in the wild card spot. They're 10 points behind Anaheim, who are third in the Pacific. So they have an awful lot of ground to make up. They do have games in hand on the Ducks, but they can't score. Still, they've got 53 goals in 24 games. And this was a problem dating back to last season. They couldn't score. They got swept by the Golden Knights because they couldn't score. Jonathan Quick's injured, albeit Jack Campbell and Al Pearson have given them some decent goaltending. It's not been enough. And that's the problem they've got when you can't score. It's too much. The Ducks haven't exactly torn it up offensively. They only have 62 goals, but that's a big difference. That 9 goals is difference. Even though they conceded 77 to the Kings 75, those extra 9 goals have earned them 12 wins in their 27 games. and the Kings have 9. And it's got the Ducks into overtime to earn bonus points or into shootouts. They have 5 bonus points to the Kings one, and these are the kind of results, or this is where teams edge into the playoffs or sink into the draft lottery. And maybe that's what the Kings need. They're not necessarily even trying to make the best of what they have. Ilya Kovalchuk has been relegated to the 4th line. He's played less than 10 minutes in the past 2 games. Willie Desjardins said, I'm not playing into his strengths. He's acknowledged it, but it's just bizarre. They signed Kovalchuk to a 3-year, $18.75 million contract in the summer. He's a 35-plus guy. He has a no-movement clause, and by all accounts, he and his family are settled in Los Angeles. His kid's in school. He's happy there. They say his attitude's been great, and he's taken it on the chin, and he took all that shit when he played in Atlanta and a little bit in New Jersey. When he left, I know it was all controversial and everything, but at that time when he left, for me, he was one of the top 5 players in the world because his two-way game had come on so much because the Devils needed him to be that little bit more. He made David Clarkson look like a friggin' elite scorer because Clarkson parked in front of the net with Kovalchuk on the point quarterbacking the power play. But now, kind of highlights it for me is he scored 4 goals and 11 points for John Stevens. And then Desjardins came in, and he's got 1 goal and 3 points in 11 games. He was the team's leading scorer. He's still tied for second, even though we've had this big drop-off into Desjardins. But I don't know what to make of the Kings here. They almost need Hughes. Quick looks to be on his way back, maybe. I think he was the first off the ice at practice today. But that's too little too late. What are they doing as a franchise now? They're criticised as being old. Well, they are. Slow? Well, what is playing fast hockey? Is it foot speed? Yes, to a point, but it's also moving the puck quickly. But I don't think they're even doing that well. This is the problem, and young players like Tyler Toffoli haven't really taken up the reins as they hoped they might. They haven't got a hell of a lot else in terms of young players coming through. Toffoli's 26, Kopitar's 31, Kovalchuk we mentioned 35, Brown 34, Carter 33, Nate Thompson 34 if you want to throw him in there, Carl Clifford 27, guys who've been key parts of the Kings' success in recent years, and they had a lot of success. But they're now in a league which is getting younger overall. They're just getting older, and you can't escape that fact. You can't ignore it and say, hey, you know what? Foot speed is one way to play quick hockey, moving the puck fast is another. But if you're not doing any of those things, what are you doing? You're getting left behind. And that's where the Kings are right now. And, we assume they'll flip Carl Hagelin. The deadline, that seemed to be the general wisdom. Get something for Hagelin. A contender will take someone like that on with his speed and his ability to play down the depth chart. But they're saddled with guys. Enough is under contract till 2021. Martinez, 2021 again. Jake Muzzin's only in contract till 2020. So maybe you look at moving something there. But it's a real difficult situation. It feels like a long road back for the Kings. This isn't like where the Rangers said we're going to take a step back and rebuild, but they've got young guys or guys in good spots backed up by veterans like Lundqvist who are still doing the business. The Kings veterans have dropped off. Guys like Kopitar will probably pick it back up again, but when you're in that situation, it's really very difficult, I think, to reboot yourself. But mention the Rangers there. Zibanejad's 25, Hayes is 26. They're talking about maybe even keeping him around now. He was trade talk. Kreider's 27. Among their notable players, only 2. Excluding Lundqvist, notable skaters, only 2 are over 30. Matt Zuccarello, 31, UFA in the summer, so they could flip him for something towards the deadline if they want to. I'm damn sure somebody or a contender would be interested in adding Matt Zuccarello at the deadline. The other one's Mark Stahl, who's maybe not the player he was. Shattenkirk, I think, despite some struggles, would still garner some interest. The Rangers have put themselves in a nice spot to try and reboot. Oh, Adam McQuaid, sorry, I forget Adam McQuaid because he's on the IR. Plus, they're picking up wins. They're doing well. They're surprisingly in the playoff picture. They're third in the Metropolitan. So that's what makes it so difficult for LA. Is other teams who've taken a step back and said, you know what, we're pulling the plug here. we're rebooting, rebuilding, remodeling, whatever, have done well. I mean, Detroit even, picking up, they've won 11 games of their 25. They've scored 72 goals. They've done okay. Done okay at home, 7-5-2. It's a reasonable record on home ice. Sort of keeps the season ticket holders on side, shall we say. There's not a whole lot to get excited about in Los Angeles. I mean, even the Blues have at least got guys you can get excited about watching. And equally, they've got pieces that you could say, right, well, if they move this guy, he'll bring something useful back. Even to the point where you say, do they move Tarasenko? And that has been something I've heard mooted a couple of times. He's 26. I don't think they will, but he's there. But again, 26, so you could move him or keep him. And you've got good years there. Ryan O'Reilly, Braden Shen. So, I think the Blues made some missteps in how they've gone about building or keeping or remodeling their roster. And it's showing in the results. They're only just a shade ahead of the Kings, but equally, when you look at the Blues, you'd say, well, actually, I like what they've got a lot more than the Kings, both now and in the next few years, because those guys are in a reasonably nice age bracket. The O'Reillys, Pietrangelo, Parayko, Jake Allen, who we talk about every week almost, he finally puts it together. He's in 28. Even just league average or slightly better gives the Blues something to work with there. And it's just that kind of all-round roster and potential. And, the young guys they've got kicking about who could do something. But I don't necessarily see that in Los Angeles. And that's what makes it so difficult. What do? Do you trade Drew Doughty? I mean, he'd probably bring back the most return at 28. It is a heavy contract. It kicks in next year. It's an $11 million cap hit. But Drew Doughty, whose stock is extremely high in the NHL still. So they talk about Kopitar. Well, he's got 6 years left at $10 million per season. As I said, he's 31, so that's maybe less appealing. If the Blues move Parayko, he's on a much more cost-effective deal. And there's all that talk of him being a possible piece to attract William Nylander. Well, I don't think LA has that kind of piece. They've been in the talk as a possible partner for the Maple Leafs if Nylander did become available on a trade. But if the Blues came in with Parayko, I think the Blues win that offer. Or that duel. So, yeah, it's very difficult to see where Los Angeles go next. One final news and note that I wanted to pick up on Scott Darling in Carolina. Going on waivers. One assumes that it will probably bring to an end a very difficult period for the player and the team. They signed him a couple of years ago. He'd had a good run with Chicago. He, I think, earned that opportunity to go out and be a starter because he performed well as the backup behind Corey Crawford on a Blackhawks team which was then starting to decline, which lent more heavily on its goaltenders than some would care to admit. I say Darling went out and he earned that 4-year deal. $16.6 million in total, but it also became something of an albatross in the end. He's not performed to the level people expected of him, that he would have expected of himself. And given the difficulties the Hurricanes had in net prior, well, the spotlight was always going to be on. And that was maybe part of the problem, because it was always felt that the only thing missing from this young, up-and-coming Hurricanes team was a goaltender. And we're kind of seeing it now. What they needed, just similar to Buffalo, was just someone who could hang around, the average kind of mark. And fair play to him, Curtis McElhaney's offered that. He's an okay goaltender, but he's good at what he does. He reminds me in the sense of what Peter Budaj became. He's a great guy to have as your backup goaltender because everybody seems to like him, speak very highly of him. They all say he's professional. And he is. Everything points to him being able to play, 20 games a year and give you a good, honest effort in those games. At least, again, something you can work with if you're a coach or an organisation, where you can say, right, well, if we put this guy in there, we know what we're going to get. We know we're going to get a decent effort, and that's going to give us a chance to win. And that's pretty much what he's done again, really, in Carolina. His numbers are very good at the moment. It's .930 save percentage, and he's put in some good performances. And, it's been noticed. I think Peter Mrazek, I've said this a few times, I wrote a blog piece on it, he's got a slightly raw deal because he's just been caved in on the penalty kill. The Hurricanes' PK was awful earlier in the year, and Mrazek really suffered on that front. So his overall numbers look worse than I think they probably should. 5-on-5, he's giving them what they're expected. I mean, he's not without holes in his game. He's very aggressive. He can be a little bit all over the place, but it's almost that's how he plays. What do you expect of Peter Mrazek? Well, we expect this very aggressive, slightly all over the place game with potentially a very high ceiling, and realistically for him to post this kind of number. And if you look at his expected save percentage on things like Corsica Hockey, well, he's pretty much there at 5v5. So I'm not quite sure what else you kind of want always when a guy is giving you that kind of effort at even strength, but he's just getting caved in because your penalty kill is a hot mess. And as I say, if you want to see what I'm talking about, there's a blog post on One Puck Short where I looked at the goals he conceded on the penalty kill, and one was on him, I think, though Brendan Perlini had blown past 3 other guys before beating Mrazek. But the others were a mix of good play by the opposing team, bad play by the Hurricanes, or a combination of the two. But clearly the Hurricanes have seen enough in Mrazek to say, well, he's worth sticking with him and McElhaney. Mrazek, obviously, the cheaper option as well over Scott Darling, which probably plays into this. But, Cat Silverman said it best on Twitter earlier. It's hard not to root for Scott Darling. He worked his way up from the SPHL to the NHL. He had this great sort of redemption arc coming into the season, and then he got injured, and it's just not come back for him. It's just not worked out. And the problem is now that big contract, unless the Hurricanes are willing to eat part of it, which I don't think they will, especially as they're already still paying Alex Semin until 2021, then what it's going to rot in the minors, I guess, unless the Flyers think that it's worth having him around till 2021 while Carter Hart has a little more time. But that's a lot of money to have a guy kind of amble around on. So I don't know what happens there. Cam Ward has a no movement clause, so it's tough to see a Chicago-Carolina swap with Ward back in Raleigh and Darling back in Chicago because of that. Darling has a modified no trade clause too. It should be added. So I feel bad for the guy. Maybe it's not that surprising of the move given the way McElhaney has played. I think at one point the talk was that as soon as Mrazek and Darling were fit, McElhaney would be waived and probably reclaimed by the Maple Leafs, if we're honest. But as it is, McElhaney's done well. Darling struggled, and here we are.
Housekeeping!
Alright, that's it for this week's show. Thank you very much for joining me once again. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can find me at RobMcGregor35. I mentioned the blog. There's a couple of blog posts on there. One about Mrazek suffering on the penalty kill. I wrote a short piece on the Ilya Kovalchuk bizarre fourth line demotion, which we talked about earlier in the podcast. I had a little bit of fun yesterday, and I picked out 7 players from the past that I would love to see in today's NHL, just to see how they fare, how they get on in an era which is much faster and more open than perhaps the one they played in. Facebook, on Facebook too, facebook.com/onepuckshort. You can always email us as well, onepuckshort@gmail.com. If you have a question, a comment, feedback, whatever, please get in touch. I'd love to hear from listeners of the show. If you're a subscriber on iTunes, I'd really appreciate it if you would leave a review. Even if you hate us, say why. Feedback's important. I enjoy doing this. I wouldn't do it if I didn't, but I want people to enjoy listening, and hopefully you do. You've stuck around for this long. But yeah, as I said, whatever your feedback may be, I welcome it. Thanks again for listening. I'll speak to you all again very soon.